report says it will be morally inexcusable for the government not to spend money turning these estates around. I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Other people who live on these so-called sink estates, and it's a terrible phrase that, isn't it? Do they behave in this way because of the conditions in which they live? Are they worthy of our sympathy, and yet more taxpayers' cash? Some would say, and it may seem an unpalatable truth, some would say that the sad fact is that some of these people don't want to turn their lives around. On the other hand, you might well be one of the people who live on one of these estates, and you may well be offended by the way in which your estate has been described by a bunch of academics based here in London. I certainly heard one person representing an estate in Wythenshawe in Manchester this morning expressing extreme anger at her estate being described as part of a national embarrassment, particularly bearing in mind the amount of money that had been pumped into that estate in Wythenshawe, and I know it well, and the efforts that has gone into restore that community. Those people are insulted by the remarks of these academics here in London, part of this right-wing think tank called Policy Exchange. Love to hear your views on all this. 0345 6060973. Is it the conditions in which these people live, the dire state of some of these estates, which leads people to behave in the way they do, deprives them of proper parenting skills, causes them to neglect their children, indulge in gang warfare and knife crime? 0345 6060973 if you've got things to say on that, particularly if you live on one of these estates or you live near one of these estates. Whatever your view, text me on 84850, tweet at LBC. Meantime, let me introduce you to Pauline Pierce, the lady who will forever be known as the Hackney heroine and a former Lib Dem spokesman for Hackney Central and Dalston wards on crime and policing. And Pauline got that moniker because she was brave enough to speak out during the riots. Pauline, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So what's your reaction to this report about some of the so-called sink estates in our country, and you've got some in the part of London where you live, being a national embarrassment?
Well, I believe it is a national embarrassment. It's a reflection of what the government's not doing. They're not addressing things that need to be addressed. These are the electorates out there that they rely on to put them in government and give them the responsibilities for the communities that live in England. And sadly, it's kind of swept aside. You can give these places a facelift, but at the end of the day, the underlying problems are still there.
And what are the underlying problems in your view, Pauline?
Such as the crime, the offences that are committed, the depression. They are victims of circumstance. It's no one's fault that you're born into poverty and having to live in poor areas and in poor estates, and no one seems to really care what happens to you. You grow on the estate, you go to school near the estate, you have the housing office in the estate, the community centres in the estate. There's a form of segregation there.
They're like ghettos. But you see, Pauline, many people listening to this programme would say, they are poor, they don't commit knife crime, they don't neglect their children. It's not the conditions that causes people to behave in this way, it's the very people themselves.
Well, indeed, that is true. But let's face it, it's not everyone on the estates that go around wielding knives and guns. We've got to be fair in how we proportion this, because people have these visions and they seem to think everyone's walking around thugging it out. It's not like that at all. A lot of the gun and knife crimes, they're related, most of the time related to drug situations, dealers and users and that sort of thing, which is a whole different area. Then there is the domestic violence element of things that, maybe. But a lot of this is a build-up from depression, living in an area where you look out your window and you just see another window in front of you. There's nothing to kind of lift the spirits as such.
Well, the government, if they were sitting here, and if there's anyone representing the government listening to LBC right now, I will be delighted to hear from you. 0345 6060973 is the number to ring if you are involved in government as a parliament, as an MP or a minister. I'd love to hear from you. They would argue, Pauline, that we spent millions on these estates. I'm not saying that life is ideal. I'm not saying that all of them are perfect by any manner of means. But as a nation, we've spent millions on these estates over the years, and many people might think it's a sort of. It's a bit too simple to say it's all down to conditions. I mean, there are people on these estates, and you know them as well as I do, I'm sure, Pauline, who spend the entire family doesn't work. They spend their entire day watching Jeremy Kyle and the likes on ITV, and they don't lift, and they take benefits right, left, and centre, and they've no inclination to change their lifestyle. And some of the members of their family will be committing some of these crimes, will be neglecting their children.
You have to, come on, this is a bit stereotypical here. I mean, there are many like that, but that's not a majority. The vast majority, when you go around these estates, it's not like the Benefit Road street we saw on TV. There are people that are desperately trying to come out of poverty, want to do better for their families, want that job that will give them the money to buy a house, buy a car, move out of the area and better themselves. There are many people out there like that. There are many that are working every hour God sends to just make ends meet, and they will never quite make that break. So we need people not to be so judgmental and say because everyone lives on that estate they all sit watching Jeremy Kyle. It's not all like that. There are the lazy ones, but as with anything, you always have a minority that do quite the opposite.
What impact has the selling off of parts of estates had on the general atmosphere there?
Wow. The social housing situation is terrible, and the gentrification and social cleansing thing that's going on, it's all good for progression and progress and making money in the boroughs and what have you, but at the end of the day, a lot of locals are being pushed out. They can't afford, they've been priced out of their own homes and their areas, so that when they do fix up the estates and give them the facelift, then they become more appealing to the new, as they say, the trendies, the hipsters that are moving in town, so they're snapping the places up. And the locals just can't afford it, so they move on. You end up with 3-4 generations living in a 3-bedroom house. It's getting quite distressful for a lot of people out there.
You call it social cleansing?
Well, this is one of the titles it's been given. It's somehow the face of the community, my community definitely, has suddenly changed dramatically within the last year and a half. And many people said I was being racist by saying there's a lot more white faces, but I can't say they were green faces or pink faces. They're actually white faces.
It's a fact,
just stating the fact.
It's become trendy, your area. Hackney's become trendy. My son lives near there. I know it very well.
Amazingly so. But in a year and a half, it just kind of went bang, all these buildings, the developers moving in, buying up all the land, buying up all the buildings. It's just an absolute influx of trending.
And it's not a good thing in your view, because it's forcing other people out, it's forcing other people, the people who originate there and have their family roots there, into worse conditions. Is that what you're saying?
Well, kind of that, yeah. But, at the same time, I'm all for it, but there needs to be an equal balance. That councils need to stop selling so many properties and land to the developers that are pricing up these properties for sale. Then it's forcing the rental market to go up. So even if you lose your council house due to all the bedroom tax issues and what have you, then you end up not able to even afford private rental because the pricing's so high and the housing benefits don't cover that kind of price. So they're caught in a catch-22. They'll be damned if they do and damned if they don't. You just can't seem to get the balance right, and this is what the councils need to work on.
Right, I suppose you'd have no argument with the conclusion of this report, which says that it would be morally inexcusable for the government not to spend money turning these estates around.
I say amen to that.
I'll bet you do. Pauline, it's a delight. I've not met you before. I've not talked to you before, but delight talking to you. Thank you very much for taking the trouble to do so. Lovely to have you on the programme. Love to know your thoughts on this as ever. 0345 6060973 is a number to ring. Do you think that the conditions on some of Britain's so-called sinker states are so bad that they're a contributory factor at least to the gang warfare, the knife crime, the child neglect that goes on there disproportionately, one with many people would argue, in respect of the rest of the nation? Do let me know your thoughts. 0345 6060973. Are the people there worthy of our sympathy? Do they deserve more money to be spent on these estates, as Pauline has so eloquently told us in the last few minutes? Please keep the calls coming. Herbie in Harrow will be with you in a tick, and I've got several others, John in Barking, Hansley and Streatham. Be patient, we'll be back right with you after the travel news. The time now is 11:15.
I'm Andy McCall in the LBC Travel Centre on the